My name is Rosie Olang, and I'm one of the 6 curators who put together the exhibition Amplitudes of Dawn. I think one of the wonderful things about working on a team with friends for one, but also with such diverse interests, and bringing together this research and exhibition project has been that each one of us have, as much as we have a common entry point, we also have individual entry points into the work. And one of the things we were also thinking about for this exhibition were the visual elements and how to visualize static, how to visualize sound. And taking that our exhibition, the departure point was the coup announcement of 1982. Thinking very much with radio, thinking about the static before an announcement and the announcement itself. So in that way, the work of Cyrus Kabiru and the BBC series, the BBC era series, formed part of our thinking in bringing the exhibition together. Cyrus himself has been interested in how to rig, how to make beautiful things out of things that have been discarded. I loved one of the stories about the Kabiru radio, which has been in his family for a couple of generations. And he talks about the experience of listening together and how radio was very much that in the past, where you would gather around this little box and hear sounds from far, far away. So we were very much thinking with that experience and what is possible in an exhibition where we are prioritizing listening together. The work of Inus Martin, the Talking World series, started in 2016 and ongoing, is also very much, I think, a more latent, a more quiet way of thinking about what is not being said or what is being said in veiled gestures, sometimes loudly. So when we're thinking about Sauti ya Kenya, when we think about how a revolution can sound like a whisper, we're thinking very much of these 2 artists as well.
Fun part on the experiment of Amplitudes of Dawn, hence in the name Amplitudes, we're interested in sound and the frequencies that those entail. But the dawn in this element is doing 2 things. We're thinking about that specific morning, some say Saturday night, but Sunday morning in August of 1982. But we're also thinking of every dawn that has come since. And we make a case, a historical case, that that particular morning had a outsized impact on the history of this country, and then we try to parse that through this show. And so if you think about the sections of the show, we try and make a very firm case. Our initial design, we were thinking of the making of the coup, the telling of the coup, and the judging of the coup. So those were the 3 stages we thought of as a sort of triumvirate or tripartite triptych, throwing all the tries in there, of trying to think about and parse what is a very complex event, despite the duration being so brief, history-wise or chronologically. And so a big part of that was the telling of the coup, and for us, we thought of it as in this domestic spaces. If you think of the time where, one, the fixed programming on TV and radio, very few people had access to the news. It's before even the news have come. People are waiting for Amka Kumekuta by Leonard Mambo and that music, Bird Commanders and so on, and they hear there's a coup. So people have been telling us these stories of, oh, I was out of town, we come in, there bodies in the city. And so first of all, we know that the death count is much lower, as often official estimates are. So we show that it was not just that one morning, those 6 hours that Ochuka claims to be president, but it's all the many years that were leading up to that, even prior to independence, the crackdown by the colonial government, the use of the same tools by Kenyatta's government, and then of course the happy inheritance, kufuata nyayo, that Moi proudly used. And we show, like we have the clock on the wall to show what that moment felt, and then almost 12 hours to the minute later, Moi is taken to the stage.
La majeshi yetu ya Kenya, nataka niseme kwamba yale yaliyotokea leo asubuhi kwa muda mfupi iliyoletea wananchi wasiwasi mwingi.
wameshindwa and we're back. Wanajaribu kutia wasiwasi, but it's over. And so we try to capture that. And when you see the colors of the posters, so that's just to gesture at the percentages of the civilians versus the service people who died on that day and then continued to die, which is why we like that it continues almost like from this room, it continues into what is a pretty brutal period of repression and state-sponsored violence, and that's why we call it punctum and fimbo ya nyayo. And then we open up into hopefully what that looks like today and how we've been responding, stories of Jaba and Umbea and Uzalendo. Come into the show, we ask you to do a pretty radical thing. As you know, you can't actually step on the flag, but we say, what about the sounds of what that flag represents, which is the national anthem? We say, there's this, a ramp, so we're talking a little bit about access, but you're also saying you're allowed to step on haki iwe ngao na nguvu. And so we ask people to do that and start to think about sound. So we're already making this link between the sound of what makes a nation, the sound of patriotism, or what we've been calling counter-patriotism. And so as you come in, the beauty of that is one, sound as a material object, but also importantly as a source for historical writing. And then I start to introduce some of the other tools that we use. So when you walk in, there's a little bit of an altar. And throughout this thing, we're making a case that many other historians and artists have made, which is that historical thinking about the past and memories can itself be a pathway to healing, if not a primary method to make that possible. And so we ask people to meditate on Yokoroboi, on the fire, on praise, on hymns, on a little bit of, I would say, bringing back ritual into historical processes, but certainly into this exhibition space. And so with that pause, we hope that we're bringing some gentleness and some care into what is in fact a very difficult and fraught history with a lot of lives that were lost, both from loyalists and people who were pro the coup. As a historian, I think the first thing is being interested in the tools and the trade of microhistory. I was very excited when we got to use the YouTube comments and people reacting to the videos that were posted of the announcement. I thought those are really powerful and rarely get included as historical sources and material. That's where we get the recollections. We had some people send in audio of their memories of that time. Clifton will talk about his thoughts and what he felt, and we all have some personal memories around that time. My father worked a few years after the coup at the Voice of VOK. So I do feel like that's slight personal interest. So we talk about this microhistory, and at the level of the microhistory, it's not just pulling in like vox populi as it was, and then having them sit and contextualized. So the beauty of Frank working with Alex Ikawa and Slim Shaka and their wider team to stage the play is to focus on these two individuals and say, yes, it's a political moment, it's your classic social and political history, but it also has this very beautiful moments of individuals and humanness, and that's kind of a wonderful tool that we will bring to bear using the radio play. I think the most exciting part for me is calling upon folks, particularly Saidiya Hartman, who coined the term critical fabulation. We went up against a lot of silence and absences. A lot of it is certainly by design. So for example, at the National Archive, there are only 2 files when you search coup, any coup, and we found that there are actually multiple mutinies that might actually be considered coups of a kind that it's hard to find actual historical material in the country on them. And so maybe in other archives they might exist, but here the 2 that we could find are confidential and not for public access, which I thought was curious. We struggled to get access to certain types of individuals, certain type of original files, so that reminds us that what feels like and has been regarded and relegated as a footnote in history continues to have some power, and there's some fear there.
Some of the questions we were asking ourselves, or the main question we were asking ourselves, was why are we here? And it emerged that for a lot of us, we are really deprived. We felt that the histories that were handed down to us were incomplete. In a lot of times, they were biased. And so thinking with other writers and thinkers like Bonaventure, who talks about the exhibition space as a place where which gives opportunity to make us to sort of recreate the versions of history that they know, and in that imagine new possibilities. And with that, we just invited a couple of friends and thought about how we can enrich the space through performance. And in that, we had the radio play that was performed by Alexander Ikawa and friends. And one of the good aspects about the radio play was that as a performance, it gives the opportunity to sort of recreate what happened then and fictionalize some aspects of it. It was interesting because a lot of us weren't born during that time, so we were sort of just trying to sort of map what happened then to the now. Even from the statement that the coup leaders read at the beginning of the coup at KBC, we found that those things that they were talking about, whether it's inflation, the cost of living, tribalism, poverty, they are still very integral today. And in a climate where we are having coups all over West Africa and discontent, economic, social, and political, we found that a lot of these problems are universal. So basically, how do we think around solutions to the now and also extend care to those who have been victims of these brutal and disenfranchising forces. And we found that through bringing these different elements of storytelling, whether it's the radio play, whether it's DJ mixes, paintings, we found that we provide a sort of breathing space where we can have space and room for imagining. Inviting audiences and exhibition attendees to also take part, it's sort of a means of indicating that we are all implicated in the coups that happen or in the stage that we are in. So we invited attendees to a zine making workshop where they had a chance to craft magazines and to craft materials and pamphlets, because after the coup, the More Kenya movement was a very central thing after 1982, and basically we're just inviting people to make small More Kenyas and little More Kenyas about what they felt is important and alternative stories to what is there, basically. Then we also invited attendees also to record their own coup messages, and sort of after going through the entire exhibition, attendees had the chance to sort of sit down and record their brief messages and sort of think of themselves as the coup plotters and record their versions of what they would have as a rallying call for revolution or upheaval. And then we got some really interesting voice notes and sound bites that we hope to also mix down into interesting music and sounds.
Let's talk about the human aspect, the personal aspect of the exhibition. Interestingly enough, for the last couple of days, for the duration of this exhibition, the name coup, the word coup has been mentioned so many times, it's become abstract. It's become a kind of like, it's when a word is mentioned so many times, sometimes it kind of loses a meaning. So we keep saying coup, 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 but like the human stories are what make it more real. So I went through like a lot of testimonials from people who were there, their sons, grandchildren. So like there are so many experiences from, so for instance, one of our friends, when we met last year, the mother had to take a milk lorry from town to Isili, through Isili, Juja Road. And a lot of things were happening along Juja Road, Madare. Like when coups happen, it's the poor, for instance, and revolutions happen, it's the poor who suffer. So hearing the mother talk of being there made that very, very real. And there are all these stories about people in Museum Hill, people all over the place, people hearing bullets, seeing bodies in the streets. Like these personal narratives, people who say that their fathers and grandfathers were in the army and they were fired and they're still suffering the consequences up to now. So this makes it, like for me, it makes it a bit more real.
And I was living in my small house in Buruburu, which was an extension far away from home. And I woke up to the news that there has been a coup. We were very scared. I could not go home.